I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome to basic political science methods, which is basically we're looking at Van Evera's uh, 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 we said guide for methods of students of political science. It's a methods book. I'm going over. This is we're finishing today, pages 40 for 38 of the final part of his first chapter, the chapter on the introduction, the assumptions of methods, theories, tests. How do we test? And now we're looking at in other words, today's question is how can specific events be explained? So therefore, we're looking at how can a specific event, how can it be explained, right? That's the question. So let's go look into this. Um, I starting at page 40. This is like the final section of this thing. Ideas, framing, causes, and effects come in two broad types: theories and specific explanations. So ideas, framing, cause, and effect come in two broad types. One, theories and specific explanations. Theories are cast in general terms and could apply to more than one case, right? Expansionism causes war, or impacts by extraterrestrial objects cause mass extinction, right? These are general terms, right? Specific explanations explain discrete event. Discrete means particular, like that's it, right? Particular wars, interventions, empires, revolutions, and other single occurrences. Example: German expansion called World War II, or an asteroid impact caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. I have covered the framing and testing of theories above, and that was all the way up in the beginning, right when I talk about we talked about phenomena. I think it's either the first or second video on the series. I think it may have been this. Yeah, this. Yeah, I think it is the first video. Um, I'm looking at this right here in my notes. Yeah, I think it is a specific explanations that goes us to the first video. First video. Second video is on good. What is a good theory? So therefore, this is this question of specific explanations, right? Um, uh, 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 how? But in other words, I have covered this framing theory. Covered the framing and testing of theories above, right? I have covered the framing and testing of theories above. I just did it, right? But how should one evaluate specific explanations, right? Now, the role of theories in historical explanations have long been debated by historians and philosophers in social science. My remark here follows Hempel's, the landmark work in the debate. For criticism of and other reservations, see Martin and McIntyre, Readings of Philosophy. A recent discussion of Clayton Roberts' Logic of Historical Nation. Um, See also Eccleston's Case Studies and Theories, who discuss the discipline configurative case studies. That is, case studies that aim to explain the case by use of general theories, right? In other words, explains the case by use of general theories. So we should, in other words, how should we evaluate specific explanations, right? We should ask four questions. These are the four questions you need to ask. And that's it. How do we do this, right? One, does the explanation exemplify a valid general theory? That is to say, a covering law. Now, 46. A general theory from which a specific explanation is deduced is the covering law for the explanation, right? So, therefore, does this explanation exemplify a valid theory? That is to say, a covering law. To access the hypothesis that A causes B, and in a specific instance, we must assess the general form of the hypothesis A causes B. If A does not cause B, we can rule out all explanations of specific instance of B that asserts the example of A, where of A were the cause, including the hypothesis A caused little b, right? In this case. So therefore, if I show that this is not true up here, then this cannot be true down here, okay? So therefore, if something invalid at this level, then it's also invalid at that level. If A does not cause big B, then A cannot have caused little b, right? Now this is that. This is the bad. This okay, sorry about the page. We assess the argument that the rooster crow. Okay, this is that we assess the argument that the rooster crow causes today's sunrise by asking whether, in general, roosters cause sunrise by their crowing. Right? If the hypothesis that the rooster crows causes sunrises has been tested and flunked, we can infer that Rouge's crow cannot explain today's sunrise. The explanation fails because the covering law is false. Okay? Generalized specific explanations are preferred to non-generalized specific explanations, right? Because we can measure the conformity of the latter, but not the latter to their covering laws. So therefore, non-specific, in other words, non-generalized specific explanations cannot be measured to the current law, but this can be measured to that covering law. The latter leaves us with no indication covering the law to evaluate, right? Non-generalized specific explanations must be recast as generalized specific explanations before we can measure this conformity. So non-generalized specific explanations must be generalized specific explanations, recast as generalized. Why? Because the non-generalized specific explanations, there's no way to measure it. We can't measure the a larger input, right? We can't this. Two, is the covering law's causal phenomena present in the case we seek to explain? Question. So the first one, again, this is that first question we did. Does the explaining theory of does the first one is does an explanation exemplify the valid theory, right? Next is the covering law's causal phenomena present in the case we seek to explain? A specific explanation is plausible only if the value of the dependent variable of a general theory on which the explanation rests is greater than zero. In other words, that has to exist. If it's zero, then it can't work, right? Even if A is confirmed causes B, it cannot explain incidents of B that occur when A is absent, right? So if A is not present in this, it can't explain it. A causes B cannot explain why B happened. Okay? Even if economic depression causes war, they can't explain wars that occur in periods of prosperity, right? Even if capitalism causes imperialism, it cannot explain communist or pre-capitalist empires, right? In other words, these conditions don't exist. Asteroid impacts may cause extinctions, but cannot explain extinctions that occurred in the absence of those impacts, right? So that something that does not happen, if that thing doesn't occur, if A doesn't occur, we can't. Then the question of A causes B, it doesn't work. Theory doesn't apply in this case, right? The covering law does not apply. Three, there are covering laws. Are the covering laws antecedent conditions met in the case? Right? Are there antecedent conditions? Theories cannot explain outcomes in cases that omit their necessary antecedent conditions. Dog bites spread rabies if the dog is rabid. Bites by non-rabid dogs cannot explain rabies cases. Okay, if the antecedent condition is not there, therefore the case is not relevant for that situation. It does not help us understand this. Explain it. Four, are the covering laws intervening phenomena observed in the case? Okay. Are these intervening phenomena? This covering law is intervening phenomena is observed in the case. Phenomena that link the covering law, posited causes and effect, should be evident and appear in appropriate time and place. Thus, if an asteroid impact kills the dinosaurs 57 million years ago, we should find evidence of the catastrophic killing process that an impact would unleash. For example, science theorized that if the impact would kill by spraying the globe with molten rock, triggering forest fires that would darken the skies with smoke, shut out sunlight, and freeze the earth. If so, we should find soot from these fires in 56 million-year-old sediment worldwide. We should also find evidence of very large continent-sized or even global molten rock showers, and even abrupt dying, and a very abrupt dying of species. 47. In fact, the sedimentary record laid down by the times of dinosaur demise confirms these predictions. Right. The debate over dinosaur extinction nicely illustrates the inference and framing predictions from specific explanation. On the impact theory, see this stuff, right? This is that whole, in other words, so that he's using the example of extinction, right? This fourth step is necessary because the first three steps are not definite. If we omit step 4, it remains possible that the covering law that supports our explanation is probabilistic, and the case at hand is among those where it did not operate. 48. The cause of probabilism is in probabilistic causal laws lie in the variance of the values of the antecedent condition that we have not yet identified. Right? Again, that's the question. Usually, he's saying that the causes of probabilism, that's in probabilistic causes, that is that it's not. This event is not typical of the. This is the one where it doesn't happen. Right? The causes of probabilism in probabilistic causal laws usually lie in the variance in the values of the antecedent that we have not yet identified. By identifying these conditions and determining them in our theory, we make its law less probabilistic and more deterministic. Right? Once we deal with the antecedent conditions, and then we move it from probabilistic to deterministic. Right? That's a good important point he makes here. In other words, a probabilistic thing is that, well, there's a chance it doesn't work. There's a probability, right? And that's because we don't know what the antecedent conditions are. Once we have the antecedent conditions, then it goes from probabilistic to deterministic, right? All the antecedent conditions that are applied. So it's probabilistic in the case at hand is among those within not operate. We also should test the explanations within case predictions as a hedge against the possibility that our faith in the covering law is misplaced. In other words, and that the law is in fact false. In other words, we need to look at in case predictions within case. We should test the explanations within case predictions as a hedge against the possibility that our faith in the covering law is misplaced. In other words, that the law is in fact false. So we need to test within case that if maybe the covering law is false. We test it with it. If it confirms, then the validity what is valid in the it shows the validity of the covering law. For these two reasons, the better detailed of the cases, the better the detail of the cases confirmed to the detail within case predictions of the explanation, the stronger the inference that explanation explains the case. Now, less convinced of the need for this last step is Hempel, who rests with the first three steps and omits the fourth. Hempel assumes that his covering laws are deterministic, not probabilistic, and are well proven. Most social science laws are probabilistic. However, most are poorly established. Hence, deducing the validity of a specific explanation from the first three steps alone is unreliable, and we should also seek empirical verification that explains causal process at least occurred before reaching final conclusions. In other words, we have to see that the causal process has in fact occurred, right? That's why we do this thing. We do step 4 in that sense. Analysts are allowed to infer the covering law that underlies the specific explanation of a given event from the event itself. Okay, so therefore, there you look at the event, we can infer from the event a general law, right? Up above. The specific case, the specific explanation of a given case underlies a specific. The thing that underlies this is something that we can infer to that these covering law, right? The covering law. The details of the event suggest a specific explanation. The analyst then frames that explanation in general terms that allow tests against the broader database. The explanation passes these tests, and the analyst then reapplies the theory to the specific case. Thus, the testing of a general theory and the explaining of a specific case can be done together and can support each other, right? So I test this within case. I also test it from that to that. So therefore, what's done here, and I test it here. So what is done here, see if it's valid, should be valid up there. So I see that to this, and then I test that to see if it's valid up here. In other words, understand that's again, these things can support each other. It's done together and support each other. Methodological myths. Philosophers of social science have offered many spurious injunctions that can be ignored. Right? They have been given as a here's our. In other words, these are the myths of this. Right? The following are among them. One, evidence infirming theories transcend the importance of evidence confirming theory. It's one myth, right? Evidence that kills are more important than evidence that confirms. Karl Popper and other falsificationists argue that theories are not verifiable, only falsifiable. Right? Popper and yes, discovery. A criticism of Popper and falsificationism, King, Cohen, and Verba, right? Is falsifications, and that tests infirming a theory are far more significant. Infirming a theory are far more significant than tests confirming it. 51. A friendly summary of falsification, David Miller writes that to falsificationists, the passing of tests makes not a dolt of difference to the status of any hypothesis, though the failing of just one test may make a great deal of difference. Again, this is the leading of this, right? So this is their first claim is narrowly correct. Their second is not. Theories cannot be proven absolutely because we cannot imagine and test every prediction they make. The possibility always remains that an unimagined prediction will fail. By contrast, infirming tests can more decisively refute a theory. It does not follow that infirming tests transcend confirming tests. However, if a theory passes many strong tests, but then flunks a test of previous untested prediction, this usually means that the theory requires previously unidentified antecedent conditions to operate. We react by reframing the theory to include the antecedent conditions, thus narrowing the scope of the theory's claim to exclude the flung test. In Popper's terms, we now have a new theory. However, all the tests passed by the old theory also collaborate the new, leaving it in a very strong shape at birth. Thus, confirming tests tell us a great deal about the old theory, about its repaired replacement, and about any later versions. Right. So, therefore, the past tests don't undo this. Popper's contrary argument stems partly from his strange assumption that once theories are stated, they are probably accepted. 52. This is again Cohen. This is, hence evidence in their favor is unimportant because it merely reinforces pre-existing belief in theory. The opposite is more often true. Most new ideas face hostile prejudice even after confirming evidence accumulates. Again, famous developments of this argument is by Thomas Kuhn, right? We need to, Thomas Kuhn's famous thing, the structure of scientific, until it becomes everyone. New things get resisted by the old theory until what happens is that no one believes the old theory anymore. The new theory is dogma. Okay? That's the paradigm, the idea of paradigms, right? New ideas often face hostile prejudice after even confirming the evidence accumulates, right? Number two, theories cannot be falsified before their replacement emerges, right? This is theories cannot be falsified before a replacement, alternative theory, right? Emil Lackos claims that there is no falsification of theory before the emergence of better theory, and falsification cannot precede a better theory. This is Lackos' falsification and methodology of social science research. This claim is too sweeping. It appears only to theories that fail some tests, but retain some explanatory power. So therefore, in other words, we should retain those theories until a stronger replacement arrives. But if testing shows that a theory has no explanatory power, we should reject it, whether or not a replacement is at hand. Theory is at hand. 55. An early reader of this chapter suggested that Lackos meant only that falsification of theories that remain some explanatory power cannot precede better theory, following the argument I have suggested here. That may be the case. Lackos' arguments are well hidden in tortured prose that gives new meaning to the phrase badly written, and no reading of such dreadful writing is ever certain or final. Okay, it's a woo. This Lackos is in other words, in case his arguments are well hidden in tortured prose that gives no meaning to the phrase badly written, and no reading of dreadful writing is ever certain or final. That's great. That's true. This is really true. This is why you should write well. This is why you should be clear. You should take care about your writing, because this is why bad writing leads us to doubt the validity of what you say. Okay, this is why marvelous point here. Many science programs, for example, medical research, advance by routinely testing theories against the hypothesis and rejecting those that fail, whether or not replacements are ready. Right. Asking those who claim to refute theories or explanations to propose plausible replacements can serve as a check on premature claims of refutation. Right. This can expose incidences where the refuting investigator held the theory to a standard that their own explanation could not meet. This suggests, in turn, that the standard was too high. In other words, that the refuters misconstrued noise in the data as decisively falsifying evidence against the theory. However, finding merit in this excuse is a far cry from agreeing that theories cannot be falsified except by the greater success of competing theories. Surely we can know what is wrong before knowing what is right. So this is a very good point. We can often know what is wrong before we know what's right. Because usually we discover what is right only by discovering what's not right. That's the way we work. A lot of times, a lot of our knowledge is negatively construed, not positively construed. But we know that it doesn't work. 3, evidence that inspired a theory should not be reused to test it. Okay, evidence that inspired a theory should not be used to test it. This argument is often attached to warnings not to test theories with the same cases from which they were inferred. It rests on the preference for blind testing. Right. This argument again raising issues. These authors here, and he goes who know the problem of using the same data to generate and test a theory, and argue that we should always try to avoid using the same data to evaluate the test that we do. Again, all these people kind of say you shouldn't do that. And is intended to blind testing. Again, a discussion is Hempel, but this has no blind testing. Now, this assumption is that the data not used to infer a theory is less well known to an investigator than used data. Hence, the investigator using used data is less tempted to sample the data selectively. Right. Blind testing is a useful check on dishonesty, but is not viable as a fixed rule. Its purpose is to prevent scholars from choosing collaborating tests while omitting infirming ones. But opposing blind test rules on social science is, in fact, impossible because investigators nearly always know something about the data before they test their theories, and thus often have good ideas what tests will show, even if they exclude the data that inspire their ideas. Right. So therefore, you can't escape this cheating mechanism. We know that this is going to work. In other words, that you have to know about that. This is probably going to do that, or that we have an idea about this. Right. So the question is more the issue that we do this not because it shouldn't be done, but rather we do this as a means of preventing people from cheating, right? Um, hence the need. Hence we need other barriers against fudging. In other words, cheating. Um, Moreover, a blind test requirement would generate a preposterous double standard in the use of evidence. The same data would be forbidden to test material to some scholars because they inferred the theory from it, while being allowed to others. How would this rule be administered? Who would record which scholar had used which data for theory making and were barred from reusing it for testing? Would we establish a centered registry for hypotheses where theories would register the origins of their ideas? How would we verify the penalty and penalize failure to accurately record hypotheses for this regularity? How would we deal with the many scholars who are not really sure where their hypotheses come from? Right? This is I have an idea of what this comes from. In other words, sometimes we use it. In other words, again, this is a mocking. This is this great mocking thing. Infusing social science professions with high standards of honesty is the best solution. In other words, don't this solution of can't use that like that. No, honesty is better. Not cheating, not doing this. 4. Do not select cases on the dependent variable. That is, do not select cases of what you seek to explain, for example, wars, without also choosing cases on the contrary, peace. Students of case method often repeat this. Students of case method often repeat this warning. 59. See Barbara Gates, case studies like the same thing. King warned that we will not learn anything about causal effects from studies of cases selected without variation on the dependent variable. They declare the need for such variation seems so obvious that we would think it hardly needs to be mentioned, and they conclude that research design that lacks such variations are easy to deal with, avoid them. A criticism by this person, of what do you call it? Criticism of Ronald Jelly, Scientific Theory and Anomaly, Social Science Inference, APSR 95. Rogossi notes that King Cohen Verba's structures point to the needlessly insufficient path of social science inquiry, and the obedience to those strictures may paralyze rather than stimulate scientific inquiry. On Giegels and King Cohen, also David Collier and James Mahaney, Insights and Pitfalls of Selection Bias Qualitative Research. Again, this is like this. So, in other words, students of case method often repeat this thing. It is not valid. Selection on dependent variable is appropriate under any of the 3 common conditions. Okay. A. If we, in other words, any of the 3 common conditions, If we compare conditions in a selected case to a known average situation, right? 60. The Slepart notes in the implicitly comparative nature of some single case studies, comparative politics, comparative method, right? The average situation is often sufficiently well known not to require further descriptive studies. So we know the average situation. There were some things we just know what it is. We only have that, it is there, simply there. If so, we can compare cases selected on the dependent variable to these known normal conditions, right? There is no need for full dress case studies to provide the shopper points of comparison, right? Thus, the erring scholars that Gigi identifies erred because they misconstrued the normal worldwide background levels of the key independent variables, intensity of labor representation that they studied. They made it because they they misconstrued the normal worldwide background. But if something is background is clear, then it's fine. No need for this. If it's something we know, it's simply the case. It's simply B. If the case has large within case variance on the study variable, permitting multiple within case congruent procedures. So therefore, this is another case. If the case has large within variance and therefore permits multiple within case congruence procedure. And C, if cases are sufficiently data rich to permit process tracing, 62, process tracing, on congruence procedures and process tracing, testing theories, and case studies in next chapter, right? That's right. Congruence procedures and process tracing. If case studies are data rich to permit process tracing. So therefore, one, if there's, in other words, we can compare the selected case to known average situations. Two, that cases have a large within case variation, permitting within multiple within case congruence procedures. And then three, cases are so data mined that we can permit process tracing. These conditions allow test methods, comparison to average conditions, multiple within case congruence procedures, and process tracing that do not require comparison to specific external cases. When they are used, failure to select cases for explicit comparison raises no problem. 5. Select for analysis theories that have concepts that are easy to measure. Okay. Well, pick things that are easy to measure. Some scholars recommend that we should focus on questions that are easy to measure. 63. King, Cohen, and Verber warn that we should choose observable rather than unobservable concepts wherever possible. Abstract and unobserved concepts such as utility, culture, intentions, motivations, identification, intelligence, or national interests are often used in social science theories, but they can be a hindrance to empirical evaluation of theories unless they can be defined in a way such that they, at least by their implications, can be observed and measured, right? This is that line. So you shouldn't do that, but then, well, it's difficult, but this criteria is not without logic, and this is the logic of what she's saying there, right? This is that code. Studies of fundamentally unknown is futile and should be avoided, right? However, he says that, again, repeating, I got interrupted again, so this criteria is not without logic, right? He said that this is futile. However, the larger danger lies in pointlessly looking under the light. when the object sought lies in darkness, but could with effort be found. In other words, the problem is, yes, it's futile to do stuff that you cannot know, but with a little work, the unknown become known, right? So therefore, we only look at things under the light. Under the things the things with us. The larger danger lies in pointlessly looking under the light when objects sought. In other words, objects sought lie in darkness, but could with effort be found. Right. Large part of social science have already diverted their focus from the important to the easily observed. It's like saying this is a problem. This is a criticism. Therefore, drifting into trivia. For example, see several decades of the American. Actually, I see even there's it's like a YouTuber on there, God Sod, and he always complains about this. He's saying, "My God, much of the psychology research and deals with unimportant themes. They just look at the same questions and do it over and over and over again because why? We have the data. We just have the data, man. They use the they don't look at they don't go and explore new questions, right? So a large part of social science has already diverted their attention focus from the important. In other words, they look at the trivial. We go to the trivia. This is. In other words, we have, and Mike, this is the thing. My teachers said, joke. We joke. I joke. And when I was a graduate student, we looked at the IR, all these quantoids, and used to joke that all their methods and everything else was they were dealing with the trivial and the obvious. It was I made a line: the painful elaboration of the obvious, or the painful elaboration of the trivial. That was the other one. I'm not using that line trivial. The painful elaborations of the obvious. How useful is that? It's trivial. Painful elaborations of the trivial. If it's not going to be dealing with important questions, but there's important questions, we don't have good data for that. Then find the data for it. That's the whole point. Einstein's general theory of relativity proved hard to test. So should he have restrained himself from devising it? Right. This is that famous line, right? The structure of the scientific program is distorted when researchers shy away from from the logical next question because its answer will be hard to find. Right. This is that line. This is the problem. This is why it's great. I mean, this is why I do. I'm a political theorist. We often engage in ideas that can't always test. We are like physicists. And I always like physicists. We create the basic models that then other people tests. Okay, other people take our ideas and we're ideas people. We have ideas. Now maybe some ideas are wrong, some ideas are right, but we can test. These can all be looked at reality and then see if they work or not. Right? That's what's going on here. Right? 65. He goes. Is that line? What is that? He goes that. The next logical question, because it'll be hard to find, right? 65. Moreover, tests that are difficult for the time being may become feasible as new tests are devised or new data emerges, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. Before computers, a lot of looking for patterns. A lot of this stuff is finding patterns. There's a movie called The Company. It's a 3-part movie about the CIA, The Company. It was a book about that, fictional book. And in the third movie, the third CD about the third part of the Company deals in 2 parts. One was it was dealing with the second half of it, which deals with the computer people coming in finding patterns, and they found something that they didn't. In other words, something that people never noticed before. But now with computers, you could run all these things through it and then find patterns, right? And then the computers allowed. In other words, computer technology allowed us to come up with the process information and process things that people never just did process for. In fact, that's the famous line. James Angleton was notorious. He had cards and cards and cards and cards. People thought he was a conspiracy person. Well, but what he was doing is he was trying to find patterns and patterns of deep, complex knowledge. Computers allowed us to do this. We can, find patterns of congruence, right? And therefore, this is what that all of a sudden hard did. Now, this is very true about this. In other words, this is great. The theories of the Kremlin's conduct under Stalin were hard to test before the Soviet collapse, but became more testable. Right. That's another, and the other reason is to keep hard questions. This is another reason to keep hard questions on the agenda. Right. Because counterfactual hypothetical testing in political science by Evera, 1991. I mean, this is once all of a sudden new data sets emerge or new technology emerge, or models of this allow us to get through. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, this is the whole story about why, data, the collection of data mining and data extraction and media things, and the way elections changed after the social media, right? That we could get more. In other words, we could predict behavior better, and therefore, because of social media's data set. everyone's data set of their actions and their choices and their preferences. Now we have, it was a mechanism to kind of figure out human behavior in that sense. The micro targeting, micro data selection became very powerful in that sense. This is why you have to be very careful, because the technology will change, and therefore the kind of data you can have. Things that couldn't be asked now can be asked in a sense. And this is why I always had a fight with Peter Lawler when he was alive, because he was always suspicious of big data. Big data for him was kind of always, for me, big data was not it was just a new opportunity. It was always going to happen. It was just better data. Better data. It's only going to allow us to now. It might be powerful enough that it leads. And that's why I was always much more. He and I disagreed on evolutionary science. Peter was very, in fact, it's very funny. I often agreed with Peter against my dissertation advisor, Larry Arnott, on some things, but I thought Peter would go too far. And even Larry himself, in my view, went too far in some of his views and made two extreme positions. I took a more I was between these two positions in that sense. This is very funny in that sense that I would argue that his hyper anti-Trumpianism fails to understand the kind of evolutionary behavior that he himself should understand. That sometimes his support of evolutionary theory was very cherry picking in that sense. And my attitude about this was not cherry picking in the sense, but rather I was looking at it as where it led me. Where it led me, and what it led. In other words, and this is the same. This is why I always still respect Charles Murray. I respect anyone who follows where the data leads you. This is why I kind of very much respect someone like Eric Kaufman and Matthew Goodwin, who are actually letting the evidence that the data and the evidence that come from it and how it does this, right? So, in other words, a better solution is to give bonus credit to scholars who take on harder tasks for studying the less observable. Now, I wish this was the case. But those of us, people like me and other people like me, probably would have better jobs. I think even Dan Mahoney, my friend Dan Mahoney, I have a piece I'm working on about Dan Mahoney, because I'm kind of like, he wrote a piece recently on American Mind that I kind of disagree with. But Dan Mahoney's work on statesmanship and stuff has been great. Now, if I've always argued Dan, even though I have an issue with Dan's statesmanship as thinker, I think it's okay if it's not really what people are treating it as. It's basically looking at statesmen as thinkers. It's not a general book about statesmen. It's basically showing the intellectual capacity in some cases of this. Now, I wish he had more cases, more diverse cases that made his point. I also would have liked him to write a general book on this, but that's neither here nor there. What his book is, okay, I have issues with it, I have problems with it, but it's not that it's a bad book. It's a very good book. It does what it attempted to do, right? It offers an introduction. It kind of offers an introduction, but it's not really an introduction. Okay. Now, someone like him, I think he wasted. He was at he should have been at a school like Harvard or Boston College, Boston University, a better school with doctoral programs. He was like same with Peter Lawler being stuck at Peter Lawler should have been at a graduate program. And I think sometimes their work suffered from not being under a more program that taught doctoral students. Now their work does produce good work, but this is the problem about this. This is the idea. The better solution is to give bonus credit to scholars who take on harder observable things, but it doesn't happen. The political science profession rewards not the people who do difficult questions, and but rather those who just do what the trends are and follow the trends and elaborate the obvious. Okay, painful, methodologically elaborate the obvious. chapter number 6 of this, and is the sixth myth. Counterfactual analysis can expand the number of observation. Counterfactual analysis can expand the number of observation available for testing theories. Okay. James Fennon's, this is counterfactual analysis can expand the number of observations available for testing theories. James Farron suggests that this argument, 66, this is okay, right? Counterfactual statements cannot provide a substitute for empirical observations, however. They can clarify an explanation. I claim X cause Y to clarify my claim. Let me explain my image of a world with world absence of X. Right? They can help analysts of surface hypothesis buried within their own minds. See how can theories be made in this chapter, right? How theories can be made, we talked about it, right? But counterfactual statements are not data and cannot replace empirical data in theory testing. So in other words, they're not data. Counterfactuals can help useful ideas, come up with ideas, but their counterfactual statements are not data and they're not testable. They're not empirical evidence. Okay. And I think this is how we end this, right? This is how we end the chapter. Well, that's it. I'm going to stop here. I hope everyone, if you like what you like it. If you've not liked it, okay, say not, but say why. If you liked it, share it on your social media, share with a friend. If you've not subscribed, subscribe. If you know someone who'd like to subscribe and should subscribe, to get them to get subscribed, like to grow a little bit of the channel. If you can follow me on social media, the links are below. My academic links are also below in that sense. Another thing you can do is you can help me what I'm doing. You can do so by subscribe to our Patreon. There's other methods too. You can figure them out. And the other way you can do it is also by buying one of my books listed below. 3 books listed below. On this, well, that's it. This is going to be leading us to the second chapter, which deal with case studies. And I'll have 5 more videos, I suspect, on that. Well, that's it. Well, have a good day. Now, this is going to be, I think I'm going to run through all these things, and then I'm probably will finish the week. So this is probably this rest of this week will be the videos. Again, Fridays will always be kind of either a messing around or a live stream. After this series on this, I might round off the week, but then I will start my I haven't figured what Schmidt yet, but I probably will be doing Rousseau. So that's it. Well, take care. Bye-bye. Have a good day.